May the Lord give this council the wisdom, discernment and courage to serve the community. Grant also that we may act compassionately and with integrity in the best interest of this shire through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. I would like to show respect and acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land and elders past, present and future on which this meeting takes place. This meeting is being audio recorded and those in attendance should refrain from making any offensive statements. There will be no other recordings of this meeting without the prior authorisation of council. Thank you, councillors. Okay, councillors, welcome to the October council meeting. We're going to point 3, application for attending meetings via video link was nil.
No, nil received, Mr Mayor.
Public participation. We've got SCR 1.1 Development and Environmental Services Committee, DSC 10.2 DA4/2020 subdivision of lot 141DP and 1144829 28 Ranch Road, Scone. Guy Evans.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and good evening, councillors. I just wanted to make a representation on behalf of Alala Investments, the owners of the land that's forming the subdivision proposal. It's that the land has been subject to activity of the former Scone Gun Club and has been determined that there is levels of contamination within the land. We've been going through quite a protracted process with our environmental consultants as well as people within council to try and sort of work out the best way forward. I just want to make it a representation today. So we support the recommendation for the deferred commencement, and we will be looking to work with council to look to remediate the land. The chosen method of dealing with the contamination is to actually have it removed and dealt with in a proper way through the proper processes under the guidelines of the EPA and New South Wales legislation. We have also engaged experts in cleaning up gun club contamination, that being the lead shot and also the contaminants that come from the clay pigeons, and this will be dealt with. I guess the other point is this is quite a costly exercise, and the subdivision that forms the basis of the approval is going to be important for those lots to assist in certainly funding the unfortunate mess that we've got in terms of the contamination that was resulting from the gun club activity. And look, I think it's just fair to say we're keen to be working with council to get this land remediated and also to get the subdivision through in one way or another. And that's really all I wanted to make and present to the council this evening.
Thank you, Guy. Councillors, you got any questions to Guy? Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Evans, for your report. I was just wondering, after you're finished remediating the lead, is that repurposed then?
They're as speaking to some of these people that clean up gun club sites, the lead can be of some value. Unfortunately, given that it tends to be the gun club activity in more recent times, the lead that's as we've been advised that the lead that's given this gun club activity, I think, has gone on for 50 years or even longer, and that the lead doesn't really have a value as such. So it would need to be, once it's remediated, it would need to be dealt with under whatever however it gets disposed of. We're not quite aware of that as yet. That has to go through further investigations and planning.
Thank you very much.
Any more questions, councillors? No? Okay, well, thank you, Guy, and we'll be getting to that recommendation shortly. Thank you.
Good one. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to the council.
Okay, councillors, move on to confirmation of the minutes. The ordinary council meeting held on the 27th of September. I'd like to move Councillor Driscoll, second Councillor Campbell. Any questions, comment, discussion?
Yes.
Councillor Abbott.
Yes, on page 7 of 10 with the risk management item, I actually voted against that. So I just want to mention that. Yes, so I'm very happy to see it being brought back tonight.
Thank you. So that's documented to change that. Thank you. Okay, all in favour? Against? Carried. Disclosure of interests.
Mr Mayor, I have disclosure of interest from two councillors. The first from Councillor Watts on 3 items. The first of those being D 10.1 development application number 139 of 2021, the laundry facility and shipping container. She declares a pecuniary and significant interest in that as she is the manager of the Scone Neighbourhood Resource Centre, and she will leave the room and have no involvement in that matter. Councillor Watts also declares an interest in item G 10.3, requests for donations, for the same reason that she's the manager of Scone Neighbourhood Centre, and she will also leave the room and have no discussion in that matter. And finally, also in G 10.5, the relocation of the Scone Neighbourhood Resource Centre further report, for the same reason that she's the manager of the Scone Neighbourhood Centre, and again, she will leave the room and have no involvement in that report either. There's also a conflict of interest from Councillor Burns and item C 10.1, White Park Management and Development Committee. He's declared a pecuniary and significant interest in that matter. As his family business quoted a job there, he will leave the room and have no involvement in that matter.
Thank you, Mr GM. Okay, council will move down to A 10.1, recognition of length of service. In accordance with council's policy, recognition of length of service, council will appropriately recognise staff with long periods of employment with the Upper Hunter Shire, including services with the former Scone, Maryborough and Murrundi Shire councils. Stephen Jones has reached 40 years of service with council. Stephen started with council on the 21st of October 1981 as a labourer with Parks and Gardens. He then moved around working with various crews. Some of the jobs he worked on were the Barnard River Scheme, concreting causeways, Sata Subdivision and Kingdom Ponds Bridge. He also spent time working with the surveying crew. Steve then moved to the road crews, learning to operate plant and progressing to grader operator, where he has been for the last 30 years. In 2015, he became construction grader team leader. Congratulations, Steve, a great effort of 40 years. So I'll move that from the chair. All in favour? Against? Carried. Over to A 10.2. Well, council, I'm sure you're all aware the Merrill COVID-19 vaccination challenge. The Upper Hunter got across the line first, and I certainly wrote and been in contact with all the mayors. I thank them for having a little bit of fun, and I'm sure the awareness, and I think it worked. And I'm going to be very proud to hand that cheque of $1,200 to Westpac, which all LGAs work, and I'll do that as soon as possible. So again, I'll move that. Robin? You don't need a second to Councillor Campbell. All in favour?
Can I comment?
Yes.
I'd just like to say I was a little bit troubled by this because it does reflect that we're very privileged and we had access to the vaccine. And so I'd just like to mention that, and I'd like that noted. Thank you.
Yes, I think it's fine, but I think it's certainly got things rolling, and especially all the other shires, but that's noted. Okay, move over to the Standing Committee's SCR 10.1, Development and Environmental Services. We'll start with dot point 1. Move Councillor Watts, second Councillor Fisher. Questions, comment, discussion? All in favour? Against? Carried. Dot point 2. Got a mover. Move Councillor Burns. Councillor Fisher. Second, Councillor Burns. Any questions, comment, discussion? Councillor Abbott.
Yes, I'm against this because I just don't think we should be having any more petrol stations approved in the Shire. There are contamination issues and the proposal doesn't comply with the SEP 55. Yes, I think it's very problematic and we need to stop approving petrol stations. Thank you.
Thank you. As the recommendation says there, the recommendation is to place the amended planning proposal on public exhibition. So that's certainly your point is taken. Any more questions, comment, discussion?
Do we have any power to stop them? I certainly concur a lot with Councillor Abbott, the fact that we've got enough here, but I was under the understanding that if they proved that they were acceptable and met the regulations, that would be approved. Is that correct?
I'll have to hand that over again. All we're doing tonight is moving to place this on public exhibition. But Matt, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So this is an application to rezone the land only at this stage. It's up to council, at some point in the future, whether it wishes to do that. Yeah, so it's a decision for council. If council doesn't wish to rezone the land, I think they can ask for a review through the Department of Planning, Industry and Environment. But yeah, it's a fair way down the track.
Thank you.
No more questions, comment, discussion?
Yes, actually, I'd just like to make one point. Again, with the flooding, I know this is for rezoning and it's to go on exhibition, but the flooding is an issue. This is really important. And I think rezoning just for a specific entity is problematic in itself. So I just like to mention that again.
Thank you. No further comment. All in favour of the dot point 2, show of hands. Against? Councillor Abbott against. Carried. Dot point 3. That's the application that we just had the presentation from Guy. Move Councillor Watts, was it? Second. Councillor Burns. Questions, comment, discussion? Councillor Abbott.
Yes, thank you. Actually, this is the one where the proposal doesn't comply with the SEP 55. I mentioned it for the one before and that's not the case. This is the one where it doesn't comply and there are contamination issues. And I just don't think that stating in the papers also that the committee supported the recommendation, because that's what it states, but I didn't support it. I'm guessing you mean the majority of the committee. Yes, so I'm against it because of the contamination and because of the cost, and we don't know that cost yet. And I think just approving this without actually knowing what the cost of remediation will be is problematic. So I'm against this. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll find that the standing committees that come to council, it's a majority of the vote. And yes, it got through to the D&E. Councillor Campbell, you're not speaking?
No, other than the fact that I think that it was discussed and the costing was to be met not by council, but to be met by the proponent. I did accept the fact that it's a bit of an unknown quantity, but if they are going to pay for the remediation, then I don't have a problem with it.
Thank you. I'll just make one comment. I believe to have that land cleared of contamination, whichever way it goes, is a great thing for the future. Any more questions, comment, discussion? All in favour? Hands? Against? Councillor Abbott? Against? Move to dot point 4. Move Councillor Fisher. Second, Councillor Campbell. Questions, comment, discussion? All in favour? Show of hands, please. That's all in favour. Carried. Over to page 25, SCR 10.2, Infrastructure Services. Move Councillor Campbell, second Councillor Fisher. Questions, comment, discussion. Councillor Abbott.
Yes, I have a question. So essentially with the water areas, where the areas in the villages are identified as not to be serviced with water, will there be any water support available for residents living in those areas? Or will those residents be left out of the water equation altogether? How can council support those residents with secure water? What are their options?
Mr. GM, you wish to, or Director?
One of the features for the reticulation system was to have a standpipe for those that weren't directly serviced by the reticulation service, so that they could still fill up from a standpipe within a reasonable distance from their home.
So just to clarify, will they get water eventually, or like some of these areas? And when the communication happens, through you, Mr. Mayor, when the communication happens with the residents in these areas, will all the residents be communicated for their thoughts?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the consultation will be open to all of those, not just those ones that we're intending on providing the solution to at this stage. There may be some in those areas that don't want it, and some in the areas that haven't been identified that do want it, and so we can change the design accordingly at that time.
No more questions, comment, discussion. Councillor Burns.
I have one, Mr. Mayor. With the increase on water reticulation throughout the Shire, which I'm all for, have we investigated any other areas where we can source water? Glenbourne is not a guaranteed water source. It is not an unstoppable force, and we don't have a high risk licence there. So we need to have a look at another area for our water source.
We are looking at a longer term water strategy. I don't know if the Director wants to comment on any work that she may have come across to date, but if not, we can provide a report to Council at an upcoming meeting on the longer term water strategy work being done.
No more questions? All in favour? Against? Carried. Over to SCR 10.3 on page 34, Corporate Services Committee. Move, Councillor Burns. Second, Councillor Fisher. Questions, comment, discussion. Councillor Abbott.
Yes, on page 40, I'm just wondering, just in relation to Warbirds, are we on track when already with the selling of the tickets, given that it's such a short lead time already and that we have Christmas and New Year in the middle of it? That's one question. Then back to page 37 with your question, Mr. Mayor, on the deferral of elections or the possible deferral of elections. What information is already available and why would they, this is the local government elections, why would they be deferred? And is it because of all the by-elections that are looming and potentially a federal election? And why could that date not be honoured, given we need our democracy in our local areas? So do you have any more information?
No, Councillor, as far as I know, the elections are taking place on the 4th of December and nominations open today, I believe, and close in next Wednesday.
So that is because you're actually mentioned in the minutes here raising that matter.
Yeah, I don't think the powers that be had made that decision by then, Mr. GM.
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, I haven't got any more information other than what's been reported in the minutes of the Corporate Services Committee.
No more questions, comment, discussion. All in favour? Against? Carried. Over to page 43, Councillor Burns got a conflict leaving the room. Okay, councillors, recommendation front, got a mover, Councillor Fisher. Second, Councillor Watts. Any questions, comment, discussion? Question, Councillor Watts.
Just in relation to the construction of the walkway, we know it's needs to be done as soon as possible. How quick can we move on that?
Director of Infrastructure, or Christian? Yep.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We can move on it tomorrow. Yep.
No more questions, comment, discussion? All in favour? Against? Carried. Councillor Burns, for your, that was passed in affirmative by the recommendation. Okay, councillors, over to page 48, C 10.2, Upper Hunter Youth Councils. Move Councillor Watts, second Councillor Driscoll. Any questions, comment, discussion? Councillor
Yes.
Abbott.
Thank you. Yes, this is a wonderful group. And it's just so wonderful that council has this, and wonderful listening to the young people. It's wonderful to see a paper from the youth council here in our papers. And I would like to hear at some stage what their views are on climate change and how they feel that we as a council are tracking in terms of climate action. Thank you.
Thank you. Take that on notice. Any further questions, comment, discussion? All in favour? Against? Carried. Over to C 10.3, page 58, Arts Upper Hunter. Got a mover. Move Councillor Watts, second Councillor Fisher. Questions, comment, discussion? Councillor Fisher.
Yeah, just a brief one. On page 59, it says that a significant assessment of the Rural Life Museum at Lake Glenbourne had been undertaken. Do we have any information back from that? What their thoughts are?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to take that on notice.
Yes,
Yep.
take that on notice. Thank you. No more questions, comment, discussion? All in favour? Against? Carried. Over to C 10.4, Liverpool Range Wind Farm Community Consultation Committee on page 66. Move Councillor Burns, second Councillor Campbell. Questions, comment, discussion? Councillor Campbell.
Only one, just as I've attended, I haven't attended the last one or two, I've done them by Zoom. Matt, you might have filled in for us, but anyway, look, in discussion at every meeting, I think this is one of the projects that hasn't received any adverse, especially from the landowners. I speak from the landowners, so I don't know about the other people. I know there was some opposition and discussion further down the line. However, most of the landowners that I've spoken to have all been very supportive of it, and also the amount of funding that will be available. We discussed that earlier, and I think that's very important that we keep that in mind, that with the reduction in turbines, that the funding does not go down, because I also note that the split up of the funds, 25% of that will only be for the maintenance of roads. Now, if we go down on that, roads is a very high cost area, and that area up there is fairly steep country. So I'm just want to make that note that we need to keep fully aware of the amount of money that's going to come back to our shire. Thank you.
Councillor Campbell, any more questions, comment, discussion? All in favour? Against? Carried. The councillors, Councillor Watts has got a conflict of interest on 3. Can I have someone to move the standing order down from G 10.5 and G 10.3? We'll come up and deal with them all. Move Councillor Burns, got a second that Councillor Campbell. Councillor Watts, I'll deal with the request for donations. I'll only deal with your one and let you be involved in the other 4. Okay, councillors, we'll do it by, we'll go to D 10.1, development application, laundry facility and shipping container on page 76. Going to move it. Move Councillor Fisher, second Councillor Abbott. Any questions, comment, discussion? All in favour?
Only one. Yeah, look, I don't oppose this in any way. I just asked the question, how is it going to be managed? Because my understanding is it's going to be open to the public, but is there going to be someone to open and close it? Because quite often that public facilities tend to get used for other purposes and defaced in certain ways. I think that it'd be a shame to see such a good facility for the Shire if that was the case. But could I have an answer for that, please?
Pringle, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's right. The Scone Neighbourhood Resource Centre will open and close the facility each day. It will only be open during daylight hours, so it will be supervised.
No more questions, comment, discussion? All in favour? Oh, your show of hands. Thank you. All in favour? Against? Carried. Now, councillors, we're mucking around a bit. We'll go down to page 144. I'll probably get lost myself here. No, coming back to that one, Councillor Fisher. We'll go down to 144G 10.5 is the relocation of the Scone Neighbourhood Research Centre further report. I've got a mover for the recommendation. Move Councillor Burns, second Councillor Fisher. Any questions, comment, discussion? Councillor Abbott?
Yes, I have some in that I think the costs that we're putting on the Scone Neighbourhood Resource Centre are a lot. And I just wonder whether we couldn't provide more assistance as a council, given that the Scone Neighbourhood Resource Centre really does provide an invaluable service to our vulnerable in our community. And you know, I can't help but think about the airport terminal demolition and how we've wasted thousands of dollars on that. And that's the sort of money that could really be useful for the Scone Neighbourhood Resource Centre. And the move is a great move. All the ideas are good, but I think council should provide more financial resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Mr. Jen, you just wish to touch on that, what we've discussed?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I can report that we've looked at reducing the cost of the divider wall, so we can probably get out of it much cheaper than the $10,000 estimated at this stage. Even as late as this afternoon, I was talking to the manager of the facility, and it looks like we've found some second-hand dividers that are acceptable to both parties to go into that facility. We've also agreed to a mechanism whereby any out-of-pocket costs can be paid back through a payment plan over time. So the manager of the facility is quite happy with that arrangement at this stage.
Any more questions, comment, discussion? All in favour? Against? Carry. Okay, council, we go back to page 124, G 10.3, request for donation. While Councillor Watts will deal with just dot point two only. Provide a donation of $585 to the Scone Neighbourhood Research Centre for development application and an S68 application fee for the laundry that will be located at the current Visitors Information Centre. Just that one. Move Councillor Fisher. Second Councillor Burns. Any questions, comment, discussion? All in favour? Against? Carried. Okay, we'll bring Councillor Watts back. Okay, welcome back, Councillor Watts. Councillor Watts, D 10.1, the development application for the laundry facility was passed as the recommendation, and G 10.5, relocation of the Scone Neighbourhood Research Centre further report was also passed as the recommendation, and dot point 2 on G 10.3, request for donations, was also passed as the recommendation, dot point 2. So councillors, we'll go back to 124, request for the other donations. We're going to deal with 1, 3, 4, 5 and 6 as a group. Got a mover? Move Councillor Burns. Second to Councillor Driscoll. Any questions, comment, discussion around it? All in favour? Against? Carried. We all back on the page?
Yeah, I think, Mr Mayor, we have to go back to G 10.1.
No, that's been passed, councillor Burns.
96.
96, is it? Oh, sorry. Thank you, councillor Burns. It's good to see you're on the ball. Oh, that happens plenty of times. Okay then, page 96, G 10.1, disclosure of interest returns. Move councillor Fisher. Second, no, councillor Burns has got to second it. Any questions, comment, discussion? Councillor Abbott?
Yes, I do. And Mr Mayor, further to a conversation or an email I had exchanged with Mr Ennard Folson, I just do want to ask why we only have one senior staff, that being the general manager. And I'd like to ask, given that this is sort of covered in here, why are directors not senior staff when to all intents and purposes they are? And certainly their portfolios are very large. And I just wonder why they aren't. And I do understand that that last year the interim GM was looking at doing a report on this. So I was just wondering if there had ever been a report that was finished on why we only have one senior staff. Thank you.
GM, would you like to answer that?
Yep. Through you, Mr Mayor. Under the Act, every council has to determine its structure. As part of that process, it determines which staff are senior staff. A council must determine that the general manager is a senior staff member. There's no wriggle room on that matter. However, it can also determine other staff to be senior staff as well below that. Typically, that would extend to directors in more medium to large councils, and in some very large councils, it even extends down to manager level. There are industrial issues. So if a council chooses to appoint senior staff, they no longer are employed under normal employment contracts or arrangements. They typically go, or they have to go on to senior designated officer contracts. So that means that there's probably less certainty for some of those senior positions. So when you're advertising, you need to keep that in mind. It gives council flexibility though in regard to dismissal of senior staff. There is probably more generous provisions for the employee if they're dismissed under the contracts than under a normal employment or award arrangement, but it gives the council the ability to dismiss and I guess appoint a bit more liberally. The decision comes down to the council at the end of the day, and part of the process for the new council will be putting a structure to the council for adoption, and that will be a consideration. So if the council wishes to have those positions designated as senior staff, they could do so at that stage, but there are obviously ramifications in doing so.
Thank you. And through you, Mr Mayor. So are there set criteria as to when you cross that line that rather the new council would consider? Like, is it a salary option or what are the rules?
Yep, through you, Mr Mayor, there is a salary threshold. It's probably only a little bit higher than what our current directors are on. I couldn't tell you what that is off the top of my head, but senior executive service level 1 is the minimum. Yep.
Where are the disclosures tabled? We come to you. Thank you.
Okay. No more questions, comment, discussion? All in favour? Against? Carried. Over to G 10.2, Agency Information Guide under the Government Information Public Access Act 2009. Move councillor Fisher. Second, councillor Burns. Questions, comment, discussion? All in favour? Councillor Abbott?
Yes, I do. I have quite a few on this. So on pages 106 and 107, the Local Government Act, where council and the organisation structure is listed, section 223, subsection 1, and it talks about to determine the senior staff positions within the organisation structure of council. So Mr Mayor, the General Manager, has pretty much set that out as to what the new council will be looking at. And then So, and also, basically on page 113, where it says council supports the principles of open government and that council is committed to open and transparent government on page 116, I'd just like to question that, because I'd like to know why, as a council, we weren't informed that this council has been taken to NCAT for the opposite of what we set out in this. And we have not, chosen not to inform councillors. And I only know that it went to NCAT because I myself provided an affidavit. And furthermore, as a councillor, I had to do a GIPA to find out information on the Merriwell Willow Tree Road, and which I then was told I could get what I wanted, but I was asked to withdraw the GIPA. So I'm just concerned that we put this out in this as a business item in the papers, but we don't actually walk the talk. So I am concerned about our approach to GIPA and freedom of information.
Mr. Jim, you want to speak to that or just take that on notice?
Yeah, I think we'll just take the comments on notice so I can look into that. I don't have a response to that. Thank you.
Can all councillors get a copy of that, please?
There's just one more thing on page 108. It does go on to actually set out the organisational structure, Mr. Mayor, of this council. And again, it would lead anyone who is looking at this to think that our directors are senior staff. So it really is an important matter for the new council, because this certainly, I do not remember this being set out for me when I first became a councillor 5 years ago. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Mr. McDonald, for saying that the new council will be looking at this. Thank you.
I thought we did talk about it, but anyway, we'll move on. Okay, no more questions, comment, discussion. All in favour? Against? Carried. Now we go over to page 124. We've handled that. Over to 139. 139 G 10.4 additional fees and charges, access to government information. Got a mover. Move Councillor Campbell, second Councillor Fisher. Questions, comment, discussion. Councillor Abbott.
Yes, I object to this because I think council should make it really easy in all areas for the community to do their freedom of information, to access GIPA. And if it is onerous and it's taking financial resources, then we should be looking at other ways at how we can reduce other costs. Because it is really essential that the public feels that they can ask information of us as an agency that should be providing this information. It's essential for transparency and for accountability. And I think once we start putting these extra fees on, it makes it very difficult for a lot of people in the community to actually access the information they want to see, to check that we're being transparent and accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Campbell.
Mayor, yeah, look, I have a comment to make regarding this. I think the number of questions and things that have been asked have just exceeded all expectations, and it costs money to do that. And I think if you were to read if those people that are asking some of those questions take the time to read the council papers and the reports on the various committees, many of those questions are answered there and are freely available. I think that what has been happening is the fact that the continuation of many questions that have been decided beforehand by council and then have to go and research all those, it is in placing a very big burden on our staff. And I'm very mindful of that, but also in the fact that who pays for that? It's the ratepayers. Many of the ratepayers, and so the ratepayers are the ratepayers over all the Shire, when many of those questions are to deal with just a particular area or a particular item. So I'm very much supportive of this. I think it might be a rationalisation too, that people might start to realise that if they're going to ask these extra questions, whether they're relevant or not I'm not for me to judge, then that there is a cost. There is no free lunch. We've got to pay for things that and services that we request.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Any more questions, comment,
I
discussion?
just have a
Councillor Burns.
question. I just have a question, Mr. Mayor. These fees are actually set by the state, aren't they?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the only one that is set is the formal GIPA.
Oh, okay.
It's just here for information, but it is, it's mandated.
Yeah.
Yep.
No worries.
The others are all optional.
No more questions, comment, discussion?
Yes, I have one more comment. With respect to free lunches, I would say if we could make savings on just basically rationalising our Christmas dinner that councillors have and that we don't go to an expensive restaurant. And we should be looking at the monthly dinner as well. Obviously, we haven't had that during COVID. But there are all sorts of areas where we can think of making reductions so we can support people who want to put in GIPA requests. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a comment. about
Last
that
comment.
too. Yeah, I'm quite happy to do that. Look, that's fine. I live an hour and so it takes me an hour and a half at times to get home because of fog and the kangaroos. In fact, I've just written my X-Trail off, hitting a kangaroo. So I also know about that. And I don't want my wife to be up there late at night having a dinner ready for me to get home. Plus the fact there's a health matter. So I believe that and the dinners that we've had, I have never seen any of the directors or the councillors go to excess in what they have ordered or also what they drink. If they have one drink, that's about all, maybe two. So I suggest, I disagree with the fact that is something that is rationalisation and saving. I think it's quite outlandish because of the other people live very close to town.
Thank you for your comment, Councillor Campbell. This is a decision council makes, not council laws. So council makes a decision. So anyway, all in favour? Against? Against. So Councillor Collison, Driscoll, Campbell, Burns and Fisher 4. Against is Councillor Abbott and Councillor Watts. Carried. Okay, over to page 148, G 10.6, signing of the annual financial statements for the year ending 30th of June 2021. Move Councillor Fisher, second Councillor Burns. Any questions, comment, discussion? All in favour? Against? Carried. Over to page 152, H 10.1, draft risk management framework, inclusion of environmental consequences.
I'll move it.
Move Councillor Abbott, second Councillor Watts. Questions, comment, discussion? Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to thank the General Manager for listening to my concerns last month and doing something about them. And I feel quite heartened by this draft risk management framework. Thank you for putting the environment on here that we consider it. Just in relation to the enterprise risk management, and I was just, on page 157, in this section with the bullet points, I just wonder at some stage whether we shouldn't, the warbirds, just for starters, shouldn't revert back to its former model where the community didn't bear the burden of risk, which is actually what it does at the moment. But I do want to say I take heart that this makes me feel much better reading this strategy. Thank you very much.
No more questions, comment, discussion. All in favour? Against? Carried. Over to page 176, 10.1, cashless sewer system update. Move Councillor Burns, second Councillor Campbell. Questions, comment, discussion. Councillor Campbell. Councillor Burns, sorry, the mover.
I think it's very, sorry, Mr. Mayor, I do think it's very important that we make very clear to councillors that we are not abandoning the sewerage or the solution for them out there, that we've got a communications policy in place ready to go tomorrow morning so that they're all aware of why we've called a halt to spending money on something that's not really working at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Burns.
Mr. Mayor,
Councillor Campbell.
Thank you. Yeah, look, I concur with that. And I think it's very, with the comments of Councillor Burns, it is very important that we inform councillors because their expectation was, and it was our expectation as a council, that we were going to move forward on that project and it was going to happen. However, I think that we need to explore other areas in more detail of how we can meet the needs of the cashless people. It is a great letdown for them, and so I really would like to make sure that we do communicate with them what's happened, but also to explore alternatives, whichever way it goes. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Oh, Councillor Watts.
Still here. It'd be amiss of me to say, how did the costings go from 2.6 to $4.3 million? And this has left the village of Cassilis without an update. I think council needs to, and especially in the upcoming, with the new council, we need to look at essential services such as sewer and water to go right across to everyone that's under our shire, under our banner, to make sure that we are living and giving them the living that they should be entitled to.
Yes. Any more questions, comment? All in favour? Against? Carried. Over to page 182, 10.2 White Park. I think you're too quick for me. Was it Councillor Watts? Move Councillor Watts, second Councillor Burns. Councillor Fisher. Councillor Fisher, I'll give it to Councillor Fisher. Any
Through you,
questions,
Mr.
comment,
Mayor.
discussion? Yes.
It's
Councillor
been
Watts.
raised about the golf cart shed being included in the future consolidated, whatever that word is. I know what it is. Lots. If we can just make sure that that is included when we do the next lots. I'm not saying that.
Staff have taken that on notice. No more questions, comment, discussion. Councillor Burns.
Just like, because I wasn't allowed in for the last one, I'd just like to make a comment that the White Park, the golf course, and then Bill Rose, it really is a sight to see as you're coming into town. It's this term of council has done a lot of work in that area and gotten the building up there. The golf course is brand new, so it's actually advertising our shire very well down there.
Thank you, Councillor Burns. No more questions, comment, discussion. All in favour? Against? Carried. Over to page 210, NM 10.1, notice of motion, Turinville Railway Crossing. Move Councillor Burns. Second, Councillor Campbell. Questions, comment, discussion. Councillor Burns.
Yeah, I'll make a comment, Mr. Mayor. I thank the staff for their response and the fact that things are already happening. I think an actual instruction from the council to the staff on this is very important because it shows that we're actually watching what we're supposed to be doing. I don't know if anyone caught the landline program on the weekend, but within that I learned a few things and I already had the notice in, but within that, in Australia there's 23,000 crossings. 23,000 crossings. No lights or boom gates at them, okay? So there's 23,000 crossings that don't have lights or boom gates. The lighting aft of the loco doesn't exist. Now the coroner in WA and a parliamentary inquiry in New South Wales both said that they need to have strobe lighting behind. Still hasn't happened. 28 loaded wheat wagons took 700 metres to stop. That's 700 metres for 28 wheat wagons. Now we run coal trains through here, which are 98 wagons, and they're a lot heavier than a wheat wagon. They're 98 tonnes each. They take about 2 Ks. So we need to get this done. We need to make sure that Turinville Road is taken care of, but every crossing in the Shire needs to be a part of this audit, including Kingdon Street, including the two at Wingen, Aberdeen. They all need to be in there. What we can do for ARTC, I don't know, but we need to make sure that we've got this up because that's what the community's asked us to do.
Any more questions, comment, discussion? All in favour? Against? Carried. Over to page 211, NM 10.2, notice of motion, gender equity training. Move councillor Abbott. Second councillor Watts. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. I acknowledge the staff comment regarding initial matters for consideration for the newly elected council at its first meeting, and I understand what they have written. However, it is important to note the distinction between a code of conduct which governs appropriate behaviours and relevant processes, etc., and a gender equity policy which would seek to address and improve on current gender imbalances in council operations. These are two distinct policies, and therefore, with respect to a gender equity policy, training for councillors and staff on gender equity should be organised as a priority following the upcoming council election.
Thank you, councillor Abbott. Anyone else like to speak? Councillor.
Yeah, look, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to speak too, and I just draw your attention to the second paragraph of the staff comments. It says, as previously advised in last month's question with notice, council does not have a specific gender equity policy, but does have a code of conduct which covers a broad range of anti-discrimination, including discrimination against race, sex, disability, age, marital status, sexual preference, religion and gender. This will be the subject of induction to training for all councillors. If the councillors wish to have a specific policy on the gender equity, this would need to be developed and considered and endorsed by the new council. I suggest to council the fact that if all councillors were to adhere by our code of conduct and also a code of meeting practice, this would not even come up. But because we're trying to get the equity, gender equity, I believe that it is quite out of what council should be doing. If we understand the code of conduct and practice that, I believe that we wouldn't be having this motion put forward. And I suggest too that each one of us have that responsibility to abide by that code of conduct and meeting practice. So I will not be supporting this motion.
Any more questions, comment, discussion?
If there's nobody else, I'll just finish. So basically, as I said before, these are two distinct policies, the ones that have been listed by council or that group, and gender equity is completely separate. And I'm talking about training for councillors. So we're not even at the policy stage. I'm looking for us seeking that we get training for councillors and staff on gender equity, because it should be organised as a priority. This is something, Mr. Mayor, which is happening across Australia. We've got all sorts of local governments and state governments looking at gender equity policies. And the first thing that we need to do here is to organise some training. And I think it should be listed as a priority for the new council come the elections on December the 4th and when they come. It is something we need to address because there is an imbalance here. Whether we like to face it or not, there is. Thank you.
Can you just, the imbalance, can you just explain that to me, please?
Where would you like me to start?
Just very quickly.
Very quickly, there isn't an equality here. There is a latent misogyny, if we like to put it brutally or clearly. There's a lot of mansplaining that happens. There are a lot of times when women, staff and councillors say something, they're often explained away. Now, it's something I've experienced, and I've actually had a few staff who, obviously I'm not going to say who, have come to me with these issues. And they do feel, and I feel too, that it is a blokey council. And I just really think this is very important. It's something across the board. We've seen it at a federal level, that they have no idea how to treat their young staffers or women in general. And it's something we do need to address, and we can. And there's a lot of goodwill here. There are a lot of good men, good women. We can do this, and it comes down to training. There are lots of people who can offer this training, Mr. Mayor, and we should be looking at it as a priority. It's something that's very important for this council to continue where people don't feel vulnerable and where they feel safe and supported. Obviously, people are going to put positions forward that are disagreed with, but it needs to be done with respect and it needs to be done with safety. And that is why I'm calling for gender equity training so that we're then equipped with knowledge and ideas as to how we go forward with our Upper Hunter Shire Council gender equity policy. I hope that's explained it for you, Mr. Mayor.
It has, and I don't agree with you. I try my best as the mayor. I don't know where you're pointing your finger anywhere near me. I try my best. I try to be fair. I'm quite sure that if I wished to run this chair very strictly, I would have a code of conduct meeting practice out most months, and I'd probably have a normal code of conduct out most months. All the training in the world, if councillors aren't going to abide by the rules and regulations, that's it. I've got no issues with it. I'm not hiding it. But if councillors aren't going to follow the rules and regulations, it's a waste of time. Okay. Closed.
Okay.
Put the motion.
All right.
Passed, moved and seconded by Councillor Abbott and Councillor Watts. All in favour? Going to make this clear. Is this going to come back to the new council to make the final decision? No. Yep. Well, I'm not voting on it as is. I'd vote on it if it come back to the new term of council to make the decision. So as
Excuse
is,
me, Mr. Mayor, you don't get the opportunity to say that. You've put
okay,
it forward and you
I'm
have
just
to
making, I'm
vote.
just making, clearing it up
No,
very
you're telling
clearly.
people how you're going to vote. That's wrong.
Well, okay, we're putting the motion up as is. Those in favour, show of hands. Those against? So the motion has been lost.
Mr. Mayor, can I have my vote recorded, please?
All votes will be recorded. Questions with notice. Over on page 212.
Yes. You're going to ask me if I'm happy with the
That's
responses?
exactly what I'm going to ask you, Councillor Abbott.
And no.
And you'll come through the chair, please.
Thank you. So, Mr. Mayor, no, I'm not. First up, question number one, I don't understand why we haven't built the viewing platform or however it is, apparatus, that we need to actually be able to look at the tiles cellar. So I don't see why we would double handle this and put a platform over the top, and then at some stage when we have money, we come back and put in some viewing platform. So that's my view on that. And now regarding my second question, I note that there is an important difference between something being inconsistent with a policy or code and something being unlawful. My question raised issues in respect of the council's code of conduct. According to the Office of Local Government, a council's code of conduct is to assist council officials to, and this is a bullet point, understand and comply with the standards of conduct that are expected of them, second bullet, enable them to fulfill their statutory duty to act honestly and exercise a reasonable degree of care and diligence. And the next bullet point, and act in a way that enhances public confidence in local government. Under provision 7.44 of part 7 of the Procedures of Administration of the Model Code of Conduct, final reports of alleged code of conduct breaches by councillors and general managers are required to be tabled in a closed council meeting. Therefore, as a councillor, I am entitled to receive confirmation of the number of breaches which have been alleged to have happened and occurred during my time in office. I accept that this may be done in camera and not during the public business of the meeting. However, the community should feel confident that as a councillor, I am receiving all information necessary to fulfil my role as a councillor. Those are my views on question 2. And question 3, in respect of my third question, to allege something is to assert or to declare a matter to be true. I asked a question which sought clarification about the application of Council's Code of Conduct. I did not assert that there had been a breach of the code. The business papers, on the other hand, very clearly and publicly allege that I have breached the Code of Conduct. Once again, it seems that there are two standards being applied. One that seeks to prevent the community from being given open information, while on the other hand, gagging me in my efforts to fulfil my role as a councillor. Thank you.
Take all that on board, Councillor Abbott, and then you've never been gagged. Okay. We need a mover for the questions with notice. No, I need a mover for those questions with notice. Move, Councillor Abbott. Seconder. Councillor Watts. All in favour? Okay, any questions around it? No need for any questions, I don't think. Councillor Burns.
I'd just like to say, Mr Mayor, through the old Scone Sports Store, it's a great question and it's come up recently, but we've known about the cellar since the start. As soon as we opened the floor up, I think it was one of the staff put their foot through the floor actually. They figured out what it was. It's been through Heritage, it's been through everywhere else. In the plans, no, we didn't. It went through, I think, at least 2 committees. No, they didn't decide to do anything with it, but they, you know, at the end of the day, yes, we will come back if we get the money down the track. But at the moment, we've just got to get that toilet block put in. That's the important thing at the moment. Let's get that done. So
Agree.
I do agree to an extent with Councillor Abbott's, through you, Mr Mayor, with her. But I think we have investigated it enough.
Okay. No more comment, questions? All in favour? Against? Carried. Someone like to move us into closed council? Move Councillor Watts, second Councillor Fisher.